Okay, today's video is about the immune system, which of course is to keep pathogens. Anything that has entered your body that doesn't belong in your body, that's a pathogen. So viruses, bacteria, fungus, the goal is to keep them out. So we have what's known as 3 lines of defense. The first line is to keep it out of your body. So it is non-specific. That means it doesn't matter what the pathogen is, whether it's strep or a common cold or flu, it doesn't matter. Keep it out of your body. It's all about barriers, so blocking it from ever getting into your blood or into your cells. I've just listed a whole bunch of examples of these barriers. Your skin is obviously your greatest barrier. The oils in your skin actually help keep lots of organisms out. Sweat and tears. Your sweat has some urea in it, and your tears have lysozymes. Lysozyme is an enzyme that's actually able to break apart cell walls of pathogens and destroy them, so then they are not able to enter into your body. Nose hairs actually help keep things out. Mucous membrane, so the entire lining of your respiratory tract and your digestive tract have a mucous membrane that helps trap and cough out pathogens. And then lastly, some acids. Acids in the stomach, acids in the vagina actually prevent microorganisms from getting into those openings. And wax in your ears actually can stop organisms from coming in. So all of this is first line. First line, not specific, just try and keep those pathogens out of your body. All right, second line. Here, it is still non-specific, meaning it doesn't matter if it's strep or a common cold, they're going to still fight in the same way. But now it's internal. So the pathogen is inside of your body. So this is what does your body do as a second line of defense to try and get rid of these organisms. First thing that you probably think of when you know you're sick, you have a fever. So the goal of the fever is to increase the body temperature to make it inhospitable. They want to make the temperature nasty for those organisms so that they die and their enzymes denature and they just can't live within you. The goal, however, homeostasis, we want to stay in balance and we don't want to destroy our own enzymes. All right, B, what causes the fever? They're caused by histamines, so chemicals released by white blood cells trigger this to occur. And I'm sure you've heard the word histamines before because when you go to the drugstore and you have a cold, you want an antihistamine. So histamines are the chemicals circulating in your blood that are causing you to sneeze and cough and have a fever and a runny nose and all of those things that make you feel sick. When a histamine is released into your blood, it causes vasodilation. That means open up the blood vessels really wide so that blood can flow to these infected areas. So if you had an infection in one, let's say you had it in your arm right here, it might feel hot to the touch. That's because vasodilation has increased blood flow to that area. And what they're trying to do is bring in more white blood cells to that area to fight the pathogen. It also brings nutrients, oxygen to those cells so that they can fight. Another thing that assists with a fever are called pyrogens, and pyro means fire. So white blood cells that are specific that will increase body temperature are called pyrogens. All right, next thing in your second line of defense are phagocytes. Phagocytes are big cells that tend to look like this, and they will engulf and surround and destroy a pathogen. Neutrophils and macrophages are 2 of the most abundant phagocytes in the human body. So they are both really good at surrounding, engulfing, and destroying pathogens. And again, non-specific. They don't care what it is. They're just going to destroy it. Complement. Complements are proteins that are released by infected cells. So you have a body cell that has been infected and those cells want to send out a warning to everybody else. So they release these proteins called complement. There's about 20 different proteins that are involved. Those signal the phagocytes to work, and they also cause inflammation. So they cause it to swell in an area, become inflamed, and probably vasodilation and a little bit of heat in that area as well. All right, interferons. Interferons are all about viruses. So cells in your body, once they've been infected by a virus, they release these interferons. Again, it's a signal. It lets the cells right around it, the neighboring cells, know that the virus is present, and they actually put on like an extra, an extra way that stuff isn't going to get into their membrane. Less permeable, that's what I want. Less permeable, less likely to get invaded by that virus. Because viruses actually some viruses, especially bacteriophages, look like this, and they have these little legs like that, and they will actually sit on and inject their DNA into a cell. And if they can't get through the cell membrane, they're less likely to infect you. So interferons try and avoid viral infection to neighboring cells. All right, lastly on my list of second line of defense are natural killer cells. Natural killer cells are amazing, and they reduce your chance of cancer. They look through your normal cells and say, oh, there's a bad cell, get rid of it. There's another bad cell. And they'll notice when cells are infected, and they'll notice when cells are cancerous. There are things that are different about the chemicals in those cells, and so they destroy them. So natural killer cells destroy your own cells that are infected or cancerous. What they do is they cause the cell membranes of those infected or cancerous cells to break. Lyse always means break apart. All right, we are moving on to our third and final response, which is called the immune response. Your third line of defense is very specific. So it is internal. It is specific to the antigen. Antigen, again, is just another word for what is produced by the pathogen. What does the pathogen have that is not belonging in our body? Now, in order to do this immune response, your body has to be able to recognize self versus non-self cells. So I'm hoping that you're thinking right away about those markers. Your cells have recognition proteins on their surface, and that makes up the major histocompatibility complex. So the way that your cells recognize, oh, Nancy Mancuso cell, oh, Nancy Mancuso cell, whoa, what is this? And we got to get rid of it. So if they do not have the ability to recognize self versus non-self cells, they will not be able to do this third line of defense because the immune response is very specific. So cells have their own markers, MHC, which is glycoproteins attached to the cell membranes to recognize self cells. Cancer cells tend to lose their ability to display those MHC markers. So that's one of the ways that natural killer cells know to attack and destroy one of your body cells that is cancerous. Infected cells and macrophages are going to display antigen markers on their MHC. So here's my macrophage, and here is the antigen, and antigens have different markers. So I'm going to give it a marker like this. This cell, let's say my body cell, has a totally different marker. Well, when this engulfs it and takes it in, it actually will start displaying it, and that lets other cells know what the marker is. So this is an antigen marker, and it is on the macrophage being displayed, and it's actually going to trigger a really important part of this immune response. There are two kinds of immune responses that your body does. There's the humoral response, and there is the cell-mediated response. Both of them notice the fact that macrophages are displaying antigen markers, and it stimulates them to divide and grow more. So we have to talk about these cells. What are the cells that are really involved in this third line of defense? What are they called? Where do they grow? And how do they act? So they are lymphocytes, which again is just a word for white blood cells. First of all, there's macrophages, and macrophages are not specific, but they display the antigen markers after destroying a pathogen. That's what I just drew a picture for you, so you know that the macrophage has the marker, and that's going to really stimulate the proliferation or the abundant mitosis, lots of cells being made, of these B and T cells. So B cells, we're going to start there. We're going to have B cells and T cells. So B cells do what's called the humoral response, and what that means is they make antibodies. First of all, they are made and they mature in your bone marrow. So think B cells, bone marrow, and also B cells make antibodies. Antibodies are specific Y-shaped proteins that disable antigens and mark them for destruction. They're also called immunoglobulins. So, a very specific B cell will make a whole bunch of these antibodies. And these antibodies each have a little bit of a difference in their shape. They have heavy chains and light chains, and they're very specific. And eventually, one of the antibodies produced is going to be a perfect match for your antigen. And you'll know sometimes when you get sick, it seems like, oh, I was only sick for a day and then I got over it really quickly. Well, your body happened to make the right antibody in a short amount of time. There are other times when you seem to be sick for much longer and your body might be actually having difficulty making an antibody that fights the antigen. When your B cells make the correct antibody for a specific pathogen, memory B cells can also be made. Now, a memory B cell knows how to make that antibody, and as soon as they are exposed again, so any subsequent exposure to an antigen, not only does it know how to make the right antibody, it will make it faster and it will make more of it. So the second response to an infection that you've already had, you often won't even know that you're getting sick from it because your body fights it so quickly. So, for example, first time you get chicken pox, if any of you have had chicken pox, I know now there's a vaccine for it, so it seems like nobody gets it anymore. But when I had the chicken pox, I was so sick and I was covered head to toe in these little red, itchy bumps. Well, if I was exposed to it again, I never got it again. And I'm sure I was exposed to it many times. But my body had created B cells that knew as soon as that antigen was in my body, oh, make the antibody for the chickenpox, it's back again. So I never had symptoms a second time because I could make memory B cells. All right, our next type are called T cells. So T cells do what's called the cell-mediated response. They are made in bone marrow. So both types of these lymphocytes were made in your bones, but these ones mature in your thymus, which is just over your heart. Cytotoxic T cells is another way, or killer T cells is another way that you will see these. They kill infected body cells, and they do that by producing cytokines. Cytokines are specific chemicals that actually ruin the membrane of the cells. They could poke holes in it, they could cause it to dissolve, and if the cell membrane dissolves, the cell is going to die. And again, there are memory T cells. That causes the cytokine that was most effective to be made again if it's exposed to that pathogen again. All right, that is the end of the notes, but I wanted to go through this diagram for you because I think it is really good for the immune response. So this is third line of defense that we're talking about here. The macrophage is not specific, so you could also consider that the second line of defense, but when it displays antigen markers, so these are viral antigen markers that it's displaying. This was the virus. Its markers are now being displayed on the macrophage. So the macrophage took in, surrounded, engulfed, and destroyed this virus, and then it showed the markers. The markers activate helper T cells. So here is a helper T cell in the middle. A helper T cell, actually I should add that back to the last notes. I didn't put helper on there, I only put cytotoxic. A helper cell is really the initiator of both the humoral response and the cell-mediated response. So first I'll go this way. This is my humoral response. It causes the proliferation or the abundant production of B cells. And B cells make antibodies, so here are all these antibodies. A plasma B cell just means it's a B cell that's traveling through the plasma of your blood. And then these B cells, antibodies, so the proteins that were made, bind to the virus and mark it as this is bad, this should be destroyed. And now another macrophage could come in and destroy it because it notices right away that it's not working. These antibodies, when they bind to the virus, they also stop it from working. So they right away deactivate and destroy this virus. So that's how it's working in your immune system to try and get rid of it. Makes the antibodies, binds to them, makes them not function anymore. Now, over here on this side, this is my cell-mediated response. Helper T cells cause the increased production of cytotoxic T cells. These are those killer cells that make cytokines. So the cytokines that are made, they will release and it will destroy an infected body cell. So they destroy the infected body cells with cytokines. Those are the chemicals that this would release, and it would destroy this cell. So this is an infected body cell. We said again that a macrophage would come surround and engulf this cell, this antigen that has the antibody attached to it. And then also, if we just go back here to our notes for a second on types of lymphocytes and responses, I want you to add here under T cells, let's do this right here, under T cells, helper T cells. These notice antigen markers on macrophages, and they initiate both the humoral and cell-mediated responses. So they do that because they are signaling the proliferation. Go through mitosis and make more of the B cells and the T cells. All right, that is the end of the immune system. I will have plenty of animations as well as diagrams, and make sure that you go through this and add some Cornell notes.